Okay. Hi, everybody. um, Thanks for having me. I wanted to thank John for reaching out and asking me to talk on a subject that I love. Um, I am a landscape designer and I work in the Hudson Valley and beyond. Um, so the one caveat is that I did assemble a lot of this information together using, reputable sources. But however, I am not a biologist. So, if people want to ask things about very in-depth scientific questions, I'll try my best. But I did put together a presentation which I presented in front of I was on the CAC is what we call it here in Clinton Corners, the Conservation Advisory Committee, and we decided to incorporate the pollinator pathway into our town, those principles into our town properties like parks and hopefully roadsides, public areas, things like that. And so we gave a presentation to the public and encouraged them as homeowners, business owners, to also follow the same cadence. And I will share my screen. Oh, share. Okay. Okay, awesome.
And I just want to add something. What she may lack in biology, according to Maya, she makes up for in garden design because she does some beautiful, beautiful drawings. They're works of art in themselves.
Thank you so much. So, what I started by doing is I listed all of the sources that I extracted a lot of information from. So if anybody would care to look up any of these agencies and organizations, they have a lot of information that's very helpful to the public. Okay, how come I can't? Of course, it's like when I share my screen and we do the run through, I'm able to go through the slides, and when it comes down to it, I'm not allowed to. Okay, so we talk about native plants in particular. When looking for native plants for your garden or whatever, see if I can go back. Sorry about that. Oh no. Oh, here we go. That's what I wanted. I'll just keep it like this. So we want to talk about biomes, and we want to talk about ecoregions because there are a gajillion amount of native plants, but we think of native plants as plants that are from the continental United States, and plants don't necessarily see it that way, right? They only live in certain types of areas where they will have the right amount of sunshine, rainfall, and specific environmental conditions in which they can thrive. So there are 5 major types of biomes: aquatic, grassland, forest, desert, and tundra. And some of these biomes can be further divided into more specific categories, such as freshwater, marine, savanna, tropical rainforest, temperate rainforest, and taiga. And we're over here. And then we also want to look at ecoregions. So ecoregions are areas where ecosystem and the type, quality, and quantity of environmental resources are generally similar. And this is how the United States is mapped in terms of ecoregions, which can also give us good information when selecting native plants that will thrive in our areas. There are many different levels of ecoregions, and I will show you all of the maps that I've got, and you'll see how detailed they get, and they're really kind of interesting and also beautiful when you start looking at how the United States can be mapped, not necessarily in by taxes or where some human just drew a line. It's like, no, this is how the plants, and this is how the land is formed, which support different plant life and wildlife. So here's level 1, and I pointed out over here that we're in 5.0 and 8.0. I also included for people that may be viewing that have maybe homes or businesses also further south, with the northern forests and eastern temperate forests. And then at level 2, we're the Atlantic Highlands, especially on your side of the river, and then also a mixed wood plains. And then level 3, Northern Highlands, Northeastern Coastal Zone, and then just the tip of like a little bit of Northern Piedmont. And then here we go, level 4. I mean, can you imagine all of these biologists that mapped all this together? I mean, it's really complex, and I'm just stunned by the amount of work that went into putting these maps together. But we're categorized as Hudson Valley and glaciated Reading Prong Hudson Highlands. So what type of ecosystems exist in our ecoregion? Tidal wetlands, flat vegetated areas that are subject to regular flooding by the tides, wetlands flooded by water, either permanently for years or decades, or seasonally for weeks or months. We have meadows, land that is covered or mostly covered with grass and wildflowers, and we have forests, an area of land dominated by trees. And then regarding keystone species, we'll talk mostly about pollinators, but Doug Tallamy, who I follow very much, he's an entomologist of note. I have a huge crush on him, and he used his backyard as well as many other spaces that were available to him to look at native plants and what types of insects are using them. And what he found was that native plants support a huge amount of native wildlife. And either exotic or sometimes invasive plant material does not. He looked into different types of um, plants specifically and labeled them as keystone species, which means that they were ranked very highly in supporting native wildlife and specifically pollinators. Um, and he also found that with the removal of these keystone species, that there would be major failures in insect populations and in other wildlife populations. I mean, insects primarily feed a lot of other types of wildlife. So his findings were very important, I think, to many people, and also alarming. Pollinators are a keystone species in most terrestrial ecosystems. Fruits and seeds derived from insect pollination are a major part of the diet of approximately 25% of all birds and of mammals, ranging from redback voles to grizzly bears. Unfortunately, in many places, the essential service of pollination is at risk from habitat loss, pesticide use, and introduced diseases. Okay, now let's talk about plants. This is a photo of Elizabeth Gertrude Knight Britton, who is a botanist born in around in the 1850s. And she's one of my favorites. Draw a little heart around her face. She helped put together the New York Botanical Garden. Okay, so we'll talk about trees. And a tree's function is sequestering pollutants, providing habitat and shade. And it's a big oak leaf there. And number one is the mighty oak. And here you have a big white oak, which is one of my favorite trees. And then next to it, you have the black oak. It's found that 445 caterpillar species use these trees as a host plant, not to mention the many other different types of wildlife that also use this tree via acorns that fall on the ground and are left for other mammals to eat or store as cash, and the branches that support birds like owls and many songbirds, and tons of insects. And then in second place, you have cherries with 409 caterpillar species that use these as a host plant. The American plum, the black cherry, and the choke cherry. This one's kind of a shrub, so it's a little bit different. It looks very different than what you would think a cherry tree looks like. And then in third place in the tree category, you have birches with 385 caterpillar species that use these trees as host plant. You have the yellow birch, the paper birch, the river birch, and the sweet birch. And to go back to what I was talking about, ecoregions and learning what, if you wanted to plant any one of these trees, you would want to find out what kind of environment you're thinking of planting any one of these trees in, because some of these, particularly the sweet birch or the yellow birch, are found, or even the paper birch are found in an upland in a woodland situation where as the river birch can take a lot of moisture and usually find it a little bit further down a hill close to a water source. And then we have shrubs providing habitat, important food source for birds. They filter pollution before reaching the drinking water. We were just talking earlier about drinking water. And then number one, you have the mighty willow with 396 caterpillar species that use this shrub as a host plant. They're one of the first things to bloom, and the bark is very also a great thing for wildlife to use as well as humans. I don't know if anyone knows, but aspirin is actually derived from willows. And you have 14 pollen specialist bees which rely solely on this plant. So another thing that Doug Tallamy found was that there are these specialist species that can solely rely on one type of plant for survival. And without that plant, their population collapses. So there's 14 of those bees that really need this shrub. And you have the pussy willow, which we commonly see a lot. This prairie willow, which I would like to see in nature somewhere. And then the black willow, which we also can kind of commonly see around streams. And then we have blueberries, which everybody loves, I know, with 276 caterpillar species using these shrubs as a host plant and 14 pollen specialists that rely on this plant, particularly bumblebees, which use something called buzz pollination, where they actually have to go into the flower and move themselves around to let the pollen come down so that they can use it and collect it. You have the high bush blueberry, which likes a very wet situation and acidic soil. You have the low bush blueberry, which you might find in the Shawangunks, growing on limestone ledges. And then you have this hillside blueberry, which you find in a woodland in a very, humusy type soil, but also a little bit on the dry side. And then number three, we got viburnums with 105 caterpillar species using these shrubs as a host plant. We have the black haw, Viburnum prunifolium, northern wild raisin, Viburnum casinoides. There's also a really cute version of this plant that only gets, it's called Little Diddy, I think, and it only gets about 2 or 3 feet tall. You have the nanny berry, Viburnum lentego, and you've got this high bush cranberry, Viburnum opulus americana. All different types. These fruit are crucial food sources for things like cedar waxwings. You will find this shrub in bloom and just covered with with bees. And it's also got a really lovely fall color. And then we have flowering perennials. So sources of nectar and pollen for insects and bees that aid in pollination and eliminate pests. Number one, we have goldenrod, 122 caterpillar species that use these perennials as a host plant. And just to clarify what a host plant is, in case anyone was wondering, a host plant is something that nurtures a young um, a young pollinator to adulthood. So you may have insects that come and they lay their eggs on the solidago, and as they emerge, they're eating the leaves. They may be using these leaves as cover in the winter time. And then, of course, you have the flowers, which are very important to for insects that need the pollen. And you have stiff goldenrod, Solidago rigida, gray goldenrod, Solidago nemoralis, and the giant goldenrod, Solidago gigantea. Also want to mention, this does not give people hay fever. It's got a bad rep. It's got a bad rep for coming out at the same time as a plant commonly known as ragweed, which usually sets people's allergies on fire. And then you have number 2, Symphotrichum asters, which are one of my favorite plants to come out in the fall. And 108 caterpillar species use these perennials as a host plant, with 33 pollen specialist bee species that rely on this plant. And over here you have the glorious bluewood aster, Symphotrichum cordifolium, the smooth aster, Symphotrichum laevis, oops, that's a typo. And then you have the calico aster, Symphotrichum lateriflorum. And then number 3, surprisingly, was Helianthus, the sunflower. These are our native sunflowers. They are not the same as the annual ones that people love to use as a cut flower. You'll find a lot of these in the woodlands. And there's 66 caterpillar species that use these perennials as a host plant, with 50 pollen specialist bees that rely on this plant. And over here we have the woodland sunflower, Helianthus divaricatus. And you have the small woodland sunflower, Helianthus microcephalus, which is a much shorter sunflower. And then over here you have the pale leaf sunflower, Helianthus stromosus. I thought I would include this little flow chart just to drive home the point about how important pollinators are. That 1 in 3 bites of food we eat are the result of animal-assisted pollination. Livestock that graze on alfalfa or clover depend on these crops to be replenished from insect-pollinated seed. Bees keep agriculture buzzing. Bees and other pollinators are directly responsible for economically and nutritionally important crops across the country. Pollinators assist in the reproduction of plants used for fibers such as cotton and flax. Pollinators beautify the planet by keeping Earth's flowering plants blooming. Insect-pollinated foods contain key nutrients such as vitamin E that are essential to our diet. And many animals depend upon the fruits, nuts, and seeds produced as a result of insect pollination, and many pollinators are important food sources for wildlife. And some troubling statistics: 28% of all North American bumblebees are facing some degree of extinction risk. 19% of butterfly and moth populations are facing decline, including those that are generalists and one with habitat-specific needs. 5 butterfly species have gone extinct since 1950. 17 species of beetles are listed as threatened or endangered. 60% of beetles are facing decline. Without bats and birds as pollinators, studies show a decline in fruit and seed production of 80%. And pollinator failure leads to food web failure, which leads to biodiversity failure, leads to agricultural failure, leads to economic failure, leads to human failure. I should really update this and also mention that monarchs have been put on the endangered list. And I should include a special slide for milkweed in particular, which is the only thing that monarchs use as a food source. And here's some things, what can I do? Never use any pesticides, including rodenticides, insecticides, herbicides, or chemical fertilizers. And just a little asterisk there, organic products are a potential danger to pollinators as well. Native plants that are specific to your ecoregion and well suited for your site. Rethink your lawn, reduce the size, reduce the mowing frequency. Remove invasive plants and rethink alien exotic plant choices. Allow leaves and debris that fall from trees in autumn to remain until spring or in perpetuity. And then you can always visit the Pollinator Pathway website for more information. And here are a few nurseries that, a few retail nurseries that have a lot of plants available and are constantly refilling their seed storage, and they're just wonderful nurseries where I can find a lot of rare plants that are great for the environment, great for our gardens and our landscapes, because they support so many pollinators and wildlife. It's also a great time to plant because the deer population has gone down, so you can really get a good garden started now without having to worry about deer pressure for a while. And that concludes my presentation. And I wondered if people had questions or comments.
I'll start with a question.
Sure.
Why would you leave the leaves? Why not blow the leaves or rake the leaves off your lawn and gardens and blow them all out? Why do you want to leave the leaves out all winter?
So this is a great question, and I can say with great confidence because I have experimented with this, and I've battled with my husband who wants to leave the leaves, or who wants to rake them up because he's afraid he's gonna kill my leaves, are going to kill his lawn. And we have left them up until mid-May and raked them away and not had any dieback on the lawn. So that being said, the reason why we leave the leaves on the lawn is because they create crucial little habitat spots for overwintering pollinators to just go in there and hide out for the winter. It's like a blanket. And for plants, it is a great source of mulch. Also protecting roots and crowns of perennials from getting hurt or damaged during the winter. I think, why else should we leave the leaves?
When would it be safe to rake them up, or do you never rake them up?
Well, particularly like depending on your specific needs, I would think that, I see no reason to rake up leaves in places like the woods, a wooded area. But, I do have a bit of lawn where, I like to have a barbecue or something. And so that is where I would clean them up. And I would only do so when the temperatures are warm enough, consistently to, um, when the pollinators have already emerged and they're very active and it's warm enough for them, because they're very sensitive to the temperature. So when it's very cold, they might come out for the day and do some buzzing around, and then they'll go back and into their little, warm spots.
Can I
Oh.
ask a question?
Yes.
I see other people have raised hands, so I wasn't sure what the way to do it, but so actually two. One, I heard that I have a lot of oak leaves, and I was told that running over the leaves with the lawn mower to kind of crunch them up a little is a good thing, and leave them that way as opposed to leaving them, whole. So I was questioning whether that makes sense. And then the other question I have is for planting pollinator friendly things. I kind of live very close to the woods and get maybe at most, 3-4 hours of sunlight, direct sunlight. So what kind of guidance would, for plants that would like that kind of situation?
Well, to answer your question about the oak leaves, it said that you don't want to, I've heard this also where, you want to mulch up the leaves and run them over. Oak leaves are indeed very dense and they don't break down very easily. I'm surrounded by oak trees, and but I choose to leave them as they are because I don't want to disturb the pollinators that have already created some kind of home for themselves over the winter. And I don't want those pollinators to wind up, getting chopped up. So that is my personal choice, and that's what I also relay to other people, that I would rather just leave them be rather than harm them.
Leola,
And
oh, sorry.
maybe we should go to some of these people that have their hands raised. Let's see, I wonder if this gives me an order. How about Leola Specht?
Hi, I actually just wanted to play into the leave thing also, and I just put in the chat the John, I think that perhaps this could help you too. If you have a ton of leaves, where it gets really heavy and thick, the first pass of leaf fall, sometimes I do mulch mow that into the lawn. I leave all the other leaves that fall on the edges and into the gardens where they are, and put excess leaves in the gardens and things. But the first pass of leaf fall, sometimes I do mulch so that it goes into the grass and, helps renourish the soil that way. Then the rest of the leaves that fall, I do leave them all on the grass. And, they help for all the reasons Maya had mentioned, but also most notably is that I needed no watering during drought, 2 months of no rain this summer at my home. And it's all, the soil gets regenerated by the leaves. It retains the right amount of moisture, and it just helps everything thrive. And the overwintering insects, it's really incredible. Sometimes they curl the leaf up and they live in there in the winter. So it is really important not to mulch all the leaves. Certainly leave plenty at the perimeter and in your garden beds and whatnot, if you can. It's really cool. And I never buy mulch, never any of these inputs, because it's all renourished automatically by the leaves.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I just saw your comment in the chat that, yeah, as the leaves break down, they provide a huge nutritional source for the plants. And also I find that they keep down weeds. So it's a win-win. Yeah, and they keep the moisture, yeah, do just as well as a regular mulch.
The other part is the good neighbor piece relating to leaves, because many neighbors don't understand people leaving leaves. They think you're irresponsible and untidy. So what I try to be especially careful about is keeping my sidewalks like free of the leaves by raking or sweeping and tidy, and so that the leaves don't blow onto other people's property and things. So I'm really careful about the adjacent areas, just because a lot of people don't understand the benefit yet.
Sure. Yes. Let's see if we could get another hand up. Judith.
Well, I'm also in love with Doug Talamy, and I want to clone him and marry him. I've been reading his books and also in conversation with Diane Greenberg. And I just now, what I do is I just do no mow May and no blow October. So I don't touch anything all during May. And once October comes around, I stop mowing. I don't even mow pathways. I don't even have lawn anymore. I just have pathways. But I stopped mowing them as well, and I stopped raking them. And I don't even mow or do anything to them until June. But it kind of, I mean, what I found is that it takes care of itself. It's, even early May, the leaves have kind of just disintegrated on their own. They don't have to be broken up. They just disintegrate. And the lawn comes in, the lawn or the walking areas come in very green, very dense, very lush. And I've watched and I've just seen the insect population around my property just go through the roof. A lot of bees and a lot of everything, and half the stuff I don't even know what it is. But I just look around and all I see is insects dancing around in the air. So I just feel that it's worth at least experimenting with, of those shoulder seasons when insects are either going to bed and tucking themselves in or waking up and making forays outside are really very hazardous for them. And when it's very merciful and nurturing of our environment, to just leave them alone, just kick around in those leaves like when you were a kid, and just watch and see what happens.
Yes, I can echo everything that you've said. And I took the No Mow May challenge, and I wound up with this carpet of wildflowers. I think my husband, he would hate me for saying this, but I'm going to throw him under the bus, because he was worried that our grass was going to be knee high and he wasn't going to be able to mow it. And people would think that, something happened to us and we'd abandon our house. And, that was just not the case. The grass didn't even get to maybe my ankles. And the wildflowers were just spectacular. And, and then by the time we actually, took out the lawnmower, it was time that the pollinators, it was definitely warm enough that they were able to, deal with a mow, I guess, and so it was nice. And you can also, mow around things like wildflowers. When they're blooming and leave little spots and patches. So I really enjoy the process also of just experimenting and seeing what happens. And, I put out one of those pollinator I call it a pollinator hotel. It's like a house shaped thing with lots of little bamboo stakes in it, and that thing filled up very quickly, and I was quite pleased. And I never saw actually what went in or went out, but I saw when they had closed up the hole, and then I saw when the hole was open, so they must have blasted out, and it was just really fulfilling to know that, I helped, hopefully. Thank you for your comment. How about Zane? Let's see, Zane's got his hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Hi. So what is your experience with any type of site preparation to establish a meadow? How much do you have to disturb the soil? How do you have to seed it? Or is it as simple as just not mowing a certain area? And then after that, how do you manage for kind of diverse species without having a bunch of goldenrod come up and just be a sea of goldenrod? And
yeah, that's a really interesting question. Of course, it really depends on the site. There's so many different factors that can vary site to site in creating a meadow, and meadows are a little bit, high maintenance because most places in our area are not really supposed to be a meadow. They always want to go back to forest. So managing a meadow so that you don't have shrubby or tree growth is a maintenance consideration. And a technique that I like to use, I'm not really sure how good it is, it's in establishing a meadow, but I like to use sheet mulching. That's something that I've really fallen in love with. I know there's a lot of information in there about controlled burning. And unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues who just, you see the pictures on their websites of these gorgeous meadows that they've created. And I've talked to them, and not going to name anyone by name, but they've used a considerable amount of pesticides to start off the process and just zapped, any and all plant life from an area and just started again, which is terrible for many reasons. And as far as, I've also become very aware and conscientious of soil microbacteria, and so tilling is not something that I'm not really into or disturbed. I try to do as least soil disturbance as possible. But let me think. If you're trying to do a very large site, I know that there are potential sources like soil and water or cooperative extensions that may have a native seed driller that you can use if you have a tractor or a machine that you can use to pull these machines, which this native seed driller has different seed boxes for different types of seeds, different size seeds, and they actually put them into the ground versus, scattering them on top, which leaves them open to, being desiccated or used as a food source, all that kind of stuff.
all right. So without disturbance, to convert a lawn into wildflowers, you would just let go of it and you get what you get, and that's it.
That is a great indicator of what would actually grow there with, what you see available. It would let you know if maybe you've got a dry spot or a wet spot, or what. It's incredible how long certain seeds can live, or certain plants can actually live without, and all they need is a bit of sunlight and to be left alone, and they germinate again. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, and as you were saying, at, I don't know, 2 or 3 years down the road, you get those woody plants coming back in, and you would recommend just regenerating it at that point, or just leaving it?
Yeah, I think like I usually people will have to mow the meadow once a year, for control of shrubs and trees.
Okay. And another question about any experience you have with deer. Is just fencing alone, is that all you can really do? I know deer tend to browse a lot of tree seedlings, but they also browse a lot of wildflowers as well. I know they're pretty selective
Oh
in
yeah.
that respect.
Yeah, they will try everything. And the only thing that I have found that keeps deer away is a physical barrier. I've tried many sprays, and well, there's a different kind of spray, which I won't even talk about because it's not organic, but that does work. But yeah, all of those smelly sprays, they may work for a little while, but if a deer is hungry enough, it will come and munch on what it can. When you're close to starvation in the winter, you will do what you have to survive.
And thanks for your time.
Thank you. How about we got Cassie?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Maya.
Hi.
Hi. I'm going to piggyback on a question somebody asked earlier. So our home is basically in the middle of the woods, and our lawn is dwindling, which is great. And we're doing good with the not mowing. But what we're finding is our sunlight is also dwindling. So somebody asked earlier, can you recommend any pollinators for areas that are limited in sunlight? And I would say also maybe 4 hours a day on a good day.
Sure. Yeah. Some of those native sunflowers that I showed a slide of, those are woodland plants. The birches, some of those are woodland plants. You may also try something that I've recently become aware of is that I guess our forests as we see them right now are not actually what they should be naturally, because we don't have the natural grazing from things like bison, and they're just natural events that aren't happening anymore in a residential setting. So which do things like let trees grow very thick and create a dense shade. So they're actually recommending that we get involved and do some culling of a variety of tree sizes, and letting in some sunlight. I can send you some information about that if you'd like, because it was really interesting to see how to see certain specific sites that they researched and how they knocked down some old growth trees. And it sounds horrible, and I was horrified, but actually it let in enough sunlight to spark the forest floor into bloom, which in turn, just became a wonderful source for pollinators and all types of other wildlife.
I could ask a question. Are those paper birches, the say a multi-stem smaller version of a white birch? Are they? Can we put those in this area? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. They look like paper birches. They're white, but they're smaller and they're kind of multi-stemmed.
Yeah, there might be. There's a few. Are you talking about white birch or the birch with the peeling bark?
Well, I'd like to get some paper birch, but I know that this is not the area for them anymore. So I'm looking for something else. And I think I've seen people plant these smaller versions now. Maybe they're just younger, but they're almost multi-stem, and they're white. They're white. I don't know if
Yeah, I would investigate further about what the species of the birch is, and then look into see if that is native. Is it being sold as a native plant? Our paper birch, our native birch here in New York, Betula papyrifera, is kind of finicky because of the zone. It's zoned from a 5 to a 6 or something like that. So it doesn't have a very wide range. If it gets very much colder, or as we've seen the trends go getting warmer, these birch are having a hard time surviving. But I think there are a few types of birch that do have the white bark, which are very attractive, that are indeed native, just coming from the South and a little bit more, southern climate friendly, I guess is the word.
So there are some white. Do you know what they are? The white native birches?
The swamp birches.
Off the top of your head?
I want to say Allegheniensis, or I'm not sure. And I know there's a ton of European varieties which are no good.
That's okay. We can talk later, and or if anybody else wants to know, you can pass out your email out here, and people can contact you.
Sure.
Maybe in the chat box, put your email. If anybody wants to contact you, they can do that.
Yes, I was just going through this chat box and looking at some of these questions that I missed. So can I follow up with my native plant nursery list? I can pass that on, I think, to John, and maybe do you have probably everyone's
We have some
email, or
it depends if they're on our list. Do you want to put your email out there?
sure. Yeah. I will type it in the chat. I'm just trying to, I'm seeing a lot of good comments here, and I love that this is a topic that people get very fired up about.
We have a few more minutes. Any other questions? Any last minute questions? Anybody? Comments?
Maya, do you make your slides available? There were a couple that I thought were very interesting. I wanted to take a little closer look. It was a little hard to see on the screen.
Actually,
Yeah.
I can answer that. This will be recorded, or this has been recorded and will be shown on our YouTube channel when we get around to doing that time over the winter. So it'll be Third Thursday series. I don't know what the name of the YouTube channel is, but I'm guessing it'll be Third Thursday Series .youtube.com or something or other. But it is recorded and will be presented at some point soon.
Maya,
Would it-
have you had any luck with talking with landscape companies, the lawn maintenance people? Very often, folks tell me that they've asked their landscaper to be more gentle, not mow and blow so much and all this kind of stuff, and yet they don't listen, or they say it'll cost more. Can you tell us a good way to talk to a landscaper about better practices that will encourage pollinators and things that we'd like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really difficult challenge, I think, with a lot of landscapers, and particularly people that mow lawns. I know a few businesses that really rely on taking on lawn care as their primary source of income. And typically, what they'll do is they'll try and go as fast as they can to all these different properties. You know, sometimes they'll just show up with a truck in a little neighborhood and hit up, 7 houses on the street, and they don't want to deal with bringing another mower in that's like, not one of those ride-on mowers, and get involved in actually healthcare of the lawn. Or I always encourage, homeowners to try their best in educating, if they're hiring someone that has not said, oh, this is my specialty and it's organic lawn care, and this is what, I think is right. And, I've trained a few services on organic lawn care, and yeah, they kind of, I hate to say it, but, begrudgingly do the work. But, it's not as easy as just showing up and, mowing and weed whacking and then leaving. There's a lot more things that you have to be aware of, I guess. A lot more care. And with trying like a pre-emergent, like corn gluten, or applying a compost tea, or using the correct a native grass that might work as a lawn, or just maintaining a lawn that is next to a perennial bed, and it's like, I think everybody's so fed up with their lawn guys these years, and I feel so bad. But one thing that I started to realize was that this trade is just not being taught. It's not being taught in any kind of trade school. It is a very essential service that gets no recognition, and almost has a very lowly presence on the hierarchy of what you can do with your life when you graduate high school or something. So John, are you trying to raise your
Yeah, I am. I do have a tip that will help you and the lawn guy and your trees. Put a nice big ring of mulch around the bottom of it so they don't chop off the roots of the tree with their lawnmower. They'll be happy, you'll be happy, the trees will be happy. So do that. Well, thanks a lot, Maya. We really appreciate you coming out here and doing this. Great presentation. Thank you, everybody else, for watching.
Thank you.
Come back.